Today I'm going to share something fairly personal. With all the posts I'm seeing on social media about us now knowing what it's like to be incarcerated or to be a caged animal, I can kind of appreciate that people are trying to sympathize, but comparing our minor inconveniences to the suffering of imprisoned animals is not a sign that we are now finally understanding their plight, but rather a testament of how truly disconnected we are from their reality. I mean, even as social media is blowing up with these posts proclaiming, "Now we understand," I'm actually witnessing people enjoying a liberation that they didn't even seek. There are far more people outside engaged in physical activity than I've ever seen, ever. But even in the case of a location where there's a real lockdown, an enforced lockdown, where you're not supposed to be going outside unless you really have to, well, they're still in their homes, surrounded by their things, their comforts, their sources of entertainment. The same location that was already chosen by those people to spend the majority of their time in a life they had already chosen. But what we truly take for granted is something we rarely even consider. Quietly and perhaps subconsciously comforting us in the backs of our minds is the knowledge that we still have a choice. Free will. We could disobey, whatever the consequences might be, but we could still choose a different path, whether we're talking about breaking the quarantine, not showing up for work, changing careers, moving, etc. Or perhaps something even more mundane, such as choosing what channel to watch on the television, what music to listen to, what food to prepare. We are surrounded by so many examples of exercising free will constantly that it sounds silly to most people for me to even point out things such as choosing to have a glass of water when you're feeling thirsty. That's a choice. It's a power to make a decision. And it's one we take for granted because we've never known a life where that choice didn't exist. With that in mind, I'd like to point out a drastic and fundamental difference between humans and other earthlings. We choose to spend our days the way we do, indoors and inactive. That's not something that's forced upon us. And it didn't require a strict quarantine for it to happen. That's what we were already doing with the majority of our time, by free will. In fact, in many cases, we pride ourselves on how we've managed to remove ourselves via technological advancements from engaging with the planet and many forms of living life at all. Our modern lifestyle is so sedentary that for us to judge the suffering of non-human animals based on our own chosen lifestyle already skews perspective immensely. Heck, it took a pandemic for most of us to leave our offices and take the 1 to 2 walks per day that are the minimal recommended activity levels suggested by health professionals. And prior to not being allowed to go to gyms, a large percentage of us even chose the free time that we had set aside for physical activity to take place indoors, still plugged in, still looking at a screen mounted in front of the treadmill or focused on whatever was playing on the headphones. Beside the fact that this primarily sedentary lifestyle is the lifestyle of our choosing, we also have the luxury of surrounding ourselves with mental stimulation of our picking. Books, television, cell phones, games, friends, family, FaceTime, music, the internet, etc. It goes on and on. But not just that. We're sleeping in beds that we chose, sitting in chairs that we like, controlling temperature levels that meet our comfort, and eating the foods that we decided to buy. No wonder we can't relate to creatures that still value and desire to take advantage of the gifts Mother Nature is always offering us with her forgiving, outstretched hands. We reject that by choice. To explain the difference between what we desire out of life and what a non-human might desire out of life. We don't even have to go to the extreme of taking an exotic, majestic, wild animal like a tiger and putting it in a cage. We need look no further than our household pets. Do you ever wonder how your dog spends the hours of the day waiting for you to return from work? Or once you do come home from work, how long it'll take for you to pay attention to it, allow it to go outside, take the walk? Can you imagine the torment of wondering if you're even going to get to take a walk that day? Now I know what you're thinking, but I have to go to work. I have to earn money, etc., etc. Well, while you may feel as though you have to do these things, don't underestimate the importance of ultimately controlling your own destiny. The power of choice. There is no gun pointed to your head. There are no metal bars holding you. There are no guards prodding you with electric rods to get into your car or to get onto a bus and go back to the same thing every morning. If somebody should be brave enough to pursue a different life, the only thing really holding them back is their own fear. Fear of failure, fear that the new path might be difficult, fear of not being liked, accepted, deemed successful, fear of being poor. It's not that I can't appreciate these fears, but the truth is that we still have a choice. You have the option to try. You have the option of failing. Consider a different example of choice. Imagine a time when you've looked out the window and seen that it was a beautiful, sunny day, but instead of going outside, you chose to binge watch something on Netflix, while your poor dog gave you one last look before attempting to sleep away another monotonous day. Look, I'm guilty. I've wasted beautiful days before. But it was a choice. In the back of my mind, I always knew I could go outside if I wanted to. And even if I or you don't realize it, that's a very comforting thought. Or imagine the flip side to good weather. Let's say there's a downpour and thunder, but you just have this weird urge to go outside, so you randomly decide to take a walk in the downpour. You could. It's totally up to you. Any danger, any consequences, any excitement, anything unexpected that might happen was a result of a choice that you were allowed to make. Now imagine instead that you have absolutely no say in the matter, that your life is not in your hands, that someone or something else decides what you will do and when, what you will eat, if anything, whether you will see the sun, whether you will be exposed to the elements with no ability to seek shelter no matter what the weather conditions are. No option of wrapping yourself in anything, or digging a hole, or hiding behind a wall. No choice. Period. No opportunity to even seek desperate measures that you wouldn't normally seek. No option. None. Period. Most of us can't even conceive of this beyond Hollywood's portrayal of incarceration, which, in most cases, is still a dream by comparison to the form of imprisonment other animals face. For the small percentage of people who have been arrested, most still had the comfort of at least knowing what was happening, why it was happening, and an expectation of what was to come, when it might end. And even if it was bad news, at least they knew. Imagine not knowing anything, not understanding anything. Imagine complete and utter confusion, fear and uncertainty, held by captors you couldn't communicate with. And now I'd like to share with you my personal experience that partially heightened my sensitivity level on this topic. Several years ago, I was imprisoned in a foreign country. I couldn't communicate with anyone. But the little information I was receiving suggested that I was never going to get out. Never. The United States and this particular country had an agreement of no interference, as well as status of incommunicado for the prisoners, meaning there was no outside contact. I was set to rot away. Life as I knew it not only changed, but was over. Forget about returning to my job. forget about returning to my relationship, forget about my friends, forget about eating my favorite food again. It was all gone. Anything I ever wanted to do with my life was not going to happen. That would be pretty horrifying in and of itself, but let me also share a few more details that really heightened and helped me appreciate captivity. This wasn't nearly as luxurious as incarceration looks on TV. I hadn't even been charged, never was actually, and had no trial scheduled. I was in a holding cell with 6 other people with just enough room for us to lay down at night and be head to toe. In the back of our little cell was a hole for us to defecate in. There was no sunlight. We were underground. Only one of my cellmates spoke a tiny bit of English, through which I learned that most of the cellmates sharing that cell with me had already been in that tiny room upwards of 6 months awaiting a trial. There was no prison yard, there was no activity time. There was no playing cards or trading for cigarettes or working down in the laundry room. It was a cell, all day, every day. I quickly learned I wasn't even allowed to exercise, lest I suffer the wrath of the guards. You see, by this stage in my life, I'd learned a few things about myself, such as that without exercise and without sunlight, my mental and emotional health would deteriorate. So to keep from spiraling into the dark place I knew I was headed, I would wait until the guards were out of sight and try to jog in place without making any noise. For mental stimulation, I would draw pictures on the wall with my mind. Often I'd find myself listening intently to the conversations of the other cellmates, even though I couldn't understand a word they were saying, just because it provided some form of mental stimulation. Or perhaps it helped me not feel so alone. I could go on for quite some time about the horror of my time in that foreign jail, but my point is for you to consider the perspective of just about any other earthling that we imprison. It was bad enough for me being captured by my own species. How horrifying it must be for other creatures to be imprisoned by us. Creatures we conveniently categorize in a way that allows us to treat them as badly as we want to treat them while meeting our needs without feeling guilty about it. I remember those who arrested me laughing with pleasure at my bad fortune. I looked at their faces, realizing I was doomed, and there was nothing I could do about it. My life was no longer in my hands. My innocence didn't matter, my pleas didn't matter. They simply didn't care. That was probably as horrifying as any moment during the entire experience, understanding that my life was held in the hands of other people, not mine. I no longer had any say in my own future. Whether I made the most of my life or wasted my existence, it would never again be my choice. And it still scares me to this day. They didn't care, much as we don't care about those we imprison. After all, we have that comforting little categorization system. Animals are here for us, right? We simply put them in that magical place of not us, and suddenly we can do to them whatever it is we need to justify. Come to think of it, we even do that to our own kind when it suits us, don't we? As bad as this experience may sound, I must also state that I endured very little in the way of physical discomfort. I was never beaten. I didn't go to bed shivering, trying to find a way to burrow into the wall for warmth. I never suffocated in stifling heat, unable to move or seek a reprieve. I never felt unbearable thirst or hunger. I had simply been stripped of free will, and that alone was nightmare enough. I was still nowhere near what animals experience at our hands. Are you beginning to understand the horror of having no control over your own life? No control of your destiny? You eat whatever crap is offered to you, if you are offered anything at all. You sleep where you are given a place to sleep. You spend your days as you are allowed, not as you choose. You don't get to go and enjoy the sun and the trees when you decide to get your lazy ass off the couch and go do so. That option is gone. You never get to see the sun or the trees again. And again, I don't even need to use an extreme example such as a bear doomed to a bear bile cage or a pig in a farrowing crate, a whale living its life in a pool, or a tiger in a zoo. No, we don't even need to go that far. How about the animals we claim to love and keep in our own homes? You know, the ones finally getting a couple of walks a day thanks to the COVID-19 virus driving us human owners outside? Hey, now you're protesting. Wait a minute. I give my dog a good life. I provide it with food and shelter. Well, good. Good for you. You've just given your dog the basics that I enjoyed in prison. Except that I at least had the option to take a shit whenever I wanted to. Your dog spends its life waiting for you to choose the moments in its life that it will get to enjoy. It is you who decides to allow it any form of stimulation. When the dog is home all day long, it isn't reading or surfing the web or watching TV. It isn't doing push-ups or sit-ups. It's waiting for the next moment in its life that is better than the current one. You wonder why dogs act like maniacs when they finally get to go outside for something as mundane as chasing a ball? Well, take it from me. If you spent your days the way we force them to spend theirs, you'd start acting a little silly for the little things as well. Guess how my cellmates that had been in prison for months spent their days? Sleeping. I guarantee they weren't sleep deprived. It is a symptom of depression. It is a way of coping. It is a way to pass the time. When your dog is lying on the floor looking miserable, don't tell yourself, oh look, he's tired. That's you making an excuse that justifies not getting your sedentary human ass off the couch and outside. You know, kind of like when you declare that magically your dog also doesn't need to take a walk in the morning because you are late to work. After all, it's just a dog. It should be able to hold its waist all day long because, hey, again, it's not a human. It's not one of us. You know, with the garbage we feed to dogs, it's amazing that they can control their defecation as well as they can. Every now and then, the guards in that prison fed me some real crap, and thank God it was up to me to choose to go and relieve myself when I needed to. Again, something we privileged humans don't even think about. The fact that we make our loved pets eat the same bargain bullshit day after day, every meal of the day. My neighbor's neglected dog, that poor thing, has diarrhea every time I let it out. Now imagine for a moment that your choices are to starve or to eat something that gives you diarrhea, because otherwise you aren't going to eat anything. That's just one example of the free will we take for granted every day. Choosing what we eat and how much, not to mention getting to go to the bathroom as soon as we feel like it in case something we ate doesn't agree with us. So next time you want to talk about the suffering we are enduring because of a few restrictions during COVID-19, I invite you to go out to one of our beloved dairies. You know, the wonderful organic ones that our country is so proud of, and sit in a calf pen for a day, alone, with nothing, all day, freshly taken from a mother you never got to know, not able to walk, not able to explore, not understanding what is happening to you, no comfort, no company, no ability to go anywhere except the 3 feet you are confined to. I wonder how many hours you could last. I wonder if, while surrounded by the sounds of unmistakable misery of other imprisoned animals that you can't even see, would you begin to find it more difficult to simply justify our imprisonment of others by simply saying, well, it's not one of us.